Okay, we'd like to welcome everyone to this edition, our sixth edition of AMMEA's Hot Seat Interview Series. Today, we're very excited. We have Dr. Ron McCurdy from the University of Southern California with us. Before we get started, I would just like to remind everyone that as you enter the session to mute your microphones until we open the platform up for questions. And I want to remind you that this is being presented by AMMEA, the Advocates for Music and Music Education Association, where our mission is to cultivate, support, and enhance music and music education in the state of South Carolina through fostering academic partnerships, professional learning opportunities, and resources for classrooms. With that being said, we're going to kick today's session off. We'd like to welcome Dr. Ronald McCurdy.
Okay, let me introduce our person. You can hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, it's a privilege and a pleasure to introduce this young guy, Ron McCurdy, which we know each other on first name because we marched in the same band together. We came to Florida A&M at the same time, 1972, and both of us are 76 graduates of FAMU. He was the second recipient of the William P. Foster Award. And that award took him to the University of Kansas, where after he got his BS at Florida A&M, he went to the University of Kansas, where he received the master's and PhD degrees. And he later on went to the University of, started off at Kansas, but went to the University of Minnesota from 1990 to 1999. And then now he's presently the professor of music in the Thornton School of Music at the University of Southern California, where he served as chair of the jazz department for 6 years. And prior to his appointment at USC, he served in other capacities at the Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz. He's played with Leslie Uggams, Ramsey Lewis, Mercy Ellington, Dr. Billy Taylor, Maynard Ferguson, Lionel Hampton, and he played with a guy named Willie Pifron during his high school days. They practiced together every day. That's his high school band director. And he learned everything. He had a father now, but he had two dads. And he's from the Muck, what they call the Muck. And so we welcome my classmate, good friend, Dr. Ronald McCurdy.
Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you for this invitation. That when the call was made a couple of weeks ago, there was absolutely no hesitation on my part to say absolutely yes. So I'm honored to be here. I'm going to share my screen right now. So let's hope this works. It worked during our during our testing period. And so hopefully it'll work now. Entire screen. Allow. Okay. It's coming. Now I can't see my. Great. Can you all see my Google?
We got you. Here? We got you. Ready?
Fantastic. Okay. First of all, I want to commend all of you directors. I know being a band director is not an easy task, and often you are making sacrifices, whether it be with your time away from your families, or even sometimes your own financial contributions are made. I remember a few years ago, I was at the Presidential Scholars event in Washington, D.C., when then Secretary of Education Arne Duncan was making a speech talking about the importance of teaching and education. And he made the statement that the quintessential teacher is someone who is selflessly dedicated to someone else's success. And I suspect that's what all of you are. Mr. McCloud mentioned my high school band director, Mr. Pifron. He was that way. And I often tell him, know you, know me. And I think we all can look over our lives and recognize people who were very instrumental along the way. I often say that I had angels on my shoulders who guided me along the way, because we all know that no one achieves anything by yourself. There's always a team of people around you. There are those who support you, those who will tell you the truth, those who will give you words of encouragement when you need to hear those kinds of words. So we've all been fortunate enough to have that, and I certainly have been the beneficiary of having had those angels to guide me along my journey. This afternoon, what I'd like to do, is just talk about some things of how I got where I am, and then we can delve into more specific things in terms of jazz education. As Leonard mentioned, we were both at Florida A&M together, and I was someone who had grown up in a home. My father was a high school principal. He was a very learned man in that he would get up every morning about 5:30. He would read 2 newspapers, and he would always put music on. So from a very early age, I heard everything from the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, the Sons of the Pioneers, Duke Ellington, Shostakovich, Bach's B minor Mass, Rachmaninoff, Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan, you name it, I heard it. And I hated it because he would put it on at 5:30 in the morning while we were still asleep. So that became my introduction to music, if you will, because I heard it every day for 18 straight years until I went off to college. There's a famous quote by Mark Twain, and that quote is, "The 2 most important times in your life are 1, the day you were born, and 2, the day you figure out why you were born." And I can say that I'm one of the fortunate ones that I knew pretty early on that I was going to be a music major. I was going to do something in music in my life. I wasn't quite sure what, but I just knew that I was going to be a musician. Because of my family pedigree of my father and mother both being educators, I saw how dedicated they were. So I think that had a lot to do with my going into education. But I always was someone who enjoyed performing. I remember my mother having these little tea parties on Sundays, and she would have me play my harmonica and sing at age 5 and 6 years old. And I always enjoyed doing that. I also remember going down to Miami every year for the Orange Blossom Classic, and I would see the Florida A&M marching band strutting down the street playing one of those great Sousa marches. And I just told my father, one day I'm going to be in that band. One day I'm going to make him be a part of the Marching 100. And I finally was able to realize that particular dream. And while at FAMU, I had a chance to be the section leader of the trumpet section. Was a pretty good student. And I remember Professor McCloud, Alfred Watkins, Marcus Young, Longinu Parsons, great classmates. And I think we all inspired one another. I mean, we all were striving for greatness. And having that kind of engagement by your peers made it fun, but it also inspired us to be our best. It's ironic that Mr. McCloud is on this call because he made a decision that changed the entire trajectory of my life. Professor McCloud had been asked to be the recipient before me. He was the first one that was asked to be the recipient of the William P. Foster Fellowship Award to go to the University of Kansas. And he turned it down. He said, I don't think I want to do that. I don't want to go to Kansas for whatever reason. And by this time, I had graduated from Florida A&M, and I had started grad school at Florida State. And I had never, Kansas was not on my radar. I had no intentions of ever going to Kansas for any reason whatsoever. And I remember I asked my girlfriend at the time, I think I told her, I said, look, I've been offered this fellowship to go to Kansas instead of to get my master's degree. And she and I had been childhood sweethearts. And she said, well, if you go to Kansas, we're going to be done. I'm not going to Kansas. So then I went to ask my mother. I said, look, I was just offered a chance to go to Kansas to get my master's degree. And her first question was, is it free? I said, well, yeah, and plus there's a stipend, then you should go. So I went, and I didn't, it was like landing on the moon. There was nothing remotely familiar to me about Kansas. my whole life up until that time had been in a very Afrocentric environment. You know, I just didn't, I didn't see that I could survive. And I would call my mother every day, Mom, I need to come home. This is not working out for me. Everything is so strange. And there weren't very many other African Americans that were involved in that program as well, other than football players being and you know being at school. But there were very few African Americans in the School of Music at the University of Kansas. Nonetheless, I stuck it out. And I'd always been told by my parents that when you go places, see if you can make yourself useful. See if you can find a way that you can make a contribution to whatever the situation is. Well, what I knew about marching band from Florida A&M did not in hardly any way transfer to what they were doing at Kansas. So my marching band knowledge, it really wasn't applicable at Kansas. They already had a wonderful symphonic band. They already had a great orchestra. And so I thought, well, the only thing that was lacking was the jazz area. There was not much happening there. Now, I didn't know a whole lot about jazz myself either. And I'll tell you, as a kid growing up, like I said, I heard the music repeatedly. So I had a concept, but I was not by any shape of the imagination a serious jazz person. I had studied classical trumpet. You know, I'm playing or Charlie A. That was my world, not jazz, but I had heard it. And I had this. I want to share this little video with you. I found this on YouTube years ago, and I use it in my jazz pedagogy class, which explains the importance of listening. Like I said, I heard this music every day for 18 years. I heard all kinds of music. I mean, I heard everything from, like I said, Handel Messiah. So I could also sing that. But I found this video, and this was a dad who was obviously a big fan of John Coltrane. He's probably taking his kids to school, and while they're driving to school, he puts on John Coltrane. Watch their response. All right, you get the idea. Cute. I love the little kid, the little girl with the pink coat on, how she's sticking her tongue out. Now, I would love, this was probably done maybe 10 years ago. I would love to see where these kids are today. And I would venture to say that probably one of them, if not all of them, are involved in music some way or another, either as practitioners or they listen to it on a regular basis. During my days at Kansas, like I said, I needed to make myself useful. And the only place where there was a spot where I could make a real contribution was in the jazz area. I didn't know a whole lot about jazz. We had a jazz band at Florida A&M that met at winter and spring quarter, but there was no class. There was no improvisational classes. There was no jazz history. And in fact, we always played, Xeroxed music. So my first adventure into jazz, I thought all jazz music was Xeroxed because I'd never seen an original score before. So anyway, my first year, we had the pleasure of having Jamie Abersol as a guest artist at what was called the Tall Corn Jazz Festival. And at this festival, Jamie was our guest soloist, and he played with our band. And I could wiggle around on the horn a little bit, but I wouldn't. I mean, when I was playing in retrospect, as I look back at it now, it was pretty sad. I could play the trumpet, but when I was playing jazz-wise, it didn't make a whole lot of sense. And I remember going up to Jamie Abersol, and I said, Mr. Abersol, How did I sound? And his response was, Ron, you need to come to my jazz camp and learn how to play jazz. That's what he told me. It was a little deflating to hear him say that, but he was absolutely right. Long story short, the next 10 years, I went to the jazz camp while in grad school. Every year, I hung around people like Ed Thigpen, Rufus Reed, uh, Ed Soph, Ken Sloan, Tom Harrell. I mean, all the guys who were playing who were also involved in education. They would be at the camp, and I would just follow them around for a week at a time and just being a sponge. At that same camp, I met David Baker. We just lost David Baker maybe a couple, 3 years ago. He was a professor at Indiana University, and he became my third father after Mr. Pfeiffer. And David Baker was someone who, I mean, he was so articulate. He was affable. The students loved him. He was a great musician. And I thought to myself, that's what I want to be. I want to be like David Baker. I want to be an educator. I want to be a composer. I want to be able to do all the things that he's doing. So I began to, he became my mentor, and I was, he was a big lover of the Lakers, so we would talk about basketball all the time. But he was just a great role model for a young guy like myself to emulate. I call that luck, because what I did at Kansas, while working on my master's and my doctorate, I kept studying. I became, and to this day, I continue to be a lifelong student. I mean, at age 66, I'm still a student. I mean, I'm not trying to say, well, I have all the answers and follow me. I can tell you what you should do. No. I'm just like you all. I'm still a student. I still practice every day. I still read. I still in this quest for knowledge. But I was prepared, and I worked harder than everybody else. And when I finished my PhD at Kansas, they gave me a job. They hired me as a professor. So I went at age 29. I went from being a student to being a professor. They hired me for a whopping $18,000 a year, and I thought that I had won the jackpot. I was so elated to have a job. And so that was a training ground for me. And I just kept working and studying and realizing what was most important. What I learned from David Baker was, and from all the people that I saw at that camp, they would talk about how important it was that you understand piano, that you understand harmony. Now, I was a pretty good student in traditional classical theory. I learned about, all about my chromatic modulations and five going to one and all those kind of things. And really, there's no real difference between jazz theory and classical theory. We just have different names for it, But anyway, let's move on. Also, I patterned my session today after some of the questions that many of you submitted to me. One of the questions you talked about the history of jazz education over the years, music education as a whole. What do you think is today's jazz programs and how to support them? I would say, first of all, let me just offer a little bit of a history about the emergence of jazz education. And jazz education is started informally with people like Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie and Miles. I mean, they were students of the music, and they would teach each other. They would take on some of the younger musicians and talk to them about harmony, about theory, about how chords worked. But and of course we know the most popular era in jazz was during the swing era, circa 1930 through the end of World War II, which is 1945. America became involved, as you know from history, involved in World War II in 1941 with the bombing of Pearl Harbor, December 7th. And that sort of signaled the end of the swing era. When we talk about pop music and dance usually go hand in hand. Show me pop music, I'll show you that people are going to be dancing to it. And that's what the swing era was about. But after World War II ended, that sort of signaled the end of the swing era. You had a group of young musicians like Dizzy and Bird during World War II who were sort of rebelling against the status quo of playing for white majority audiences, playing the same music night after night. And this led to the emergence of what we call bebop. It was during World War II. There was a project called the Great Lakes Project. This was another formal aspect of jazz education. The next round of education happened after World War II. There was a thing called the GI Bill, which allowed veterans to gain access to low interest loans to buy homes. They were able to go to school for free. In fact, I think that's still in existence today. However, for African Americans, most were shut out of the GI Bill. So mostly young white veterans were able to go to school for free. And as it turned out, many of them ended up going to a school called the University of North Texas, down in Denton, Texas. They had played in some of the swing bands of the 1930s, early 40s, and they demanded some form of education. Now, jazz was a four-letter word. Most deans and university presidents and administrators associated jazz with all the illicit behavior of the society. Plus, the progenitors of that music were primarily African American. They thought, jazz is related to drugs, prostitution, numbers running, gambling, all the things that we don't want to be a part of our institution of higher learning, which is why it took a while for most schools to begin to embrace having jazz as part of the curriculum. Nonetheless, there was Emmy Hall down at North Texas State University in Denton, who began to experiment by having what he called laboratory bands or lab bands. And he used that name as a means of making it sound somewhat academic. Like you have a science lab, so we're gonna have a music lab, an environment for exploring how one might go about creating music. And it took a while, but it caught on. But it was only in a few places because most schools, again, were quite resistant to jazz. Kansas was being one of those schools, but just before I arrived, there was a dean there at Kansas that if you were caught playing jazz in the practice rooms, you could have your scholarship revoked. I mean, that's how adamant they were about not having jazz be a part of the curriculum. The Berklee College of Music in Boston was another school that had begun to offer jazz courses as part of their curriculum. So a group of educators, Stan Kenton being one of them, Dr. Billy Taylor being another, had begun to figure out, well, what can we do to instigate and encourage more schools to begin to have jazz as part of their curriculum? They had the idea, we'll turn it into a competition. We'll have competitive jazz festivals where we'll give ribbons and prizes and trophies for those who will participate in these jazz festivals. The first festival was founded in 1959 by the time they got it off the ground. And it worked. By the late 1970s, early 80s, practically every high school and college in the country had some semblance of a jazz studies program. It worked. You had more people, wanting to have a jazz band program, and so it was a very successful experiment. Now, when I was the president of the International Association for Jazz Educators, IAJE. It's now kind of going away, and now Jen has taken its place. But one of my messages that I wrote as president of that organization toward the end, I had written, and I said that we had sort of outlived the competitive jazz festival. Why did I say that? Because in many ways, the competitive jazz festival was almost antithetical to real education and real teaching. What do I mean by that? There were some educators who would select their repertoire for the jazz festival in August in preparation for the festival that was taking place in April. So for almost 8 or 9 months, they're playing the same 4 charts every day, all day, trying to perfect them so that they could win the jazz festival. And in my humble opinion, that was not education. So all of a sudden, you had festivals that were, where the focus was on winning. And if your band did not win, that means that your entire year was a failure. And again, in my opinion, that's not what jazz education should be. Also, what's lacking, as people begin to major in music, and I suspect all of you probably have degrees in music education, and I would just ask rhetorically, how many of you in your college experiences had a jazz pedagogy class that would train you to learn how to direct a jazz ensemble? How many of you took jazz piano? How many of you learned how to read a score with the rhythm section parts on it? And I'll tell you, back to my Kansas days, that's where I was. When I started doing the second jazz band at Kansas, I felt comfortable looking at the score where the saxophones and the trumpets and the trombones were, but that bottom part of the score where the rhythm sections resided, where there was a piano score where they had C7 sharp 9 sharp 5, F7 plus 7, it's a sharp 7. I had no idea what any of those sounds sounded like. I couldn't deal with it. So one of the challenges that I find is happening even today is that most schools, most curriculums involving music education majors do not have courses that will help them to direct a jazz ensemble. So consequently, most I find from adjudicating jazz festivals, I find a lot of high school jazz band directors rehearsing and conducting the jazz band the same way they conduct and rehearse their wind ensemble or concert band. And these are two different animals. Okay. Let's talk about this jazz band. Now, at Kansas, when it's now 1983, I have my doctorate, I'm a professor, I'm directing the top jazz band. And because we didn't have a jazz major, we just had a jazz band and a few classes. But I started an improv class, I started a jazz history class, I began to assemble combos. But I had a lot of students in my jazz band who were not music majors. Like, I found that my best jazz players were engineering majors, pre-med majors, physics majors, not music majors. So I only had them twice a week for 2 hours. So the question became, how do I get them to a point where we can raise the level of the band? So I began to have what I call this holistic approach to directing the jazz ensemble. Someone asked the question about how do you go about starting a jazz band when you have, such, where marching band is such predominant. And I have my second bullet here. You just do it. You just start a band. Even if you don't have full instrumentation, you may have some clarinets in your band. You may have a couple of flute players, maybe a French horn. And these are not traditional jazz instruments, but you have to be a part of your band situation. What I found out that in my band, I had to figure out a way to bring them up to speed to teach jazz theory, history, composition, and rehearse the band all within the same environment. And I had a few of my music majors who really weren't very strong jazz players who didn't have much of a concept. So early on, I would start every rehearsal by putting on a recording. And we would have open-ended listening, and I would ask open-ended questions. Like, what did you hear? Short detachment, was he playing? What the piano player, was he or she using the sustain pedal? How did they comp or accompany? The soloists, did they play in one register of their instrument? What scales did they use? Was it all diatonic? Was it non-diatonic? Was it chromatic? And we would have those kinds of open-ended discussions to engage in what I call analytical. Listen, I listen just for fun. I remember being able to sing. My father used to love Ella Fitzgerald, and one of her songs was "How High the Moon." Somewhere there's music, how faint the tune. Somewhere there's heaven. So I could sing all those songs, but I wasn't analyzing what I was hearing. I could parrot what I had heard, but I was not engaging what I call analytical listening. So we would start every rehearsal by listening to an example of music. It might be Count Basie, but we would listen, analyze, and talk about it. If we were playing a certain chart and I had a recording of it, I would always play the chart, have the band follow along with the score. So if I'm doing Molten Swing, boom, bed laid up, bed laid loot up, boot up, boom, boom, beat. I found, or what we all know in jazz music, certainly in notation, what's written on the page is not necessarily how you would play it, particularly if you have been trained in a classical environment. For example, if you have eighth note followed by a quarter note followed by an eighth note, da da da. This is how you play it if you're playing in a classical situation. Do da ba. Jazz situation, you go do da ba, do da ba, ba ba ba. Same rhythm, how it's written, but how you interpret it is very different. Another very important thing that I think is important from a historical standpoint, as you're playing jazz music, if you're performing this music, and if you go back to the whole African diaspora, we recognize that jazz music is about the performer. Western art music is about the composer. So if you're playing Beethoven's Fifth, bum, 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 you're not going to change that. You're not going to come to rehearsal one day for performance and say, you know, dog, I'm feeling a little different today. I'm going to go, bum, 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 bum. If you do that, that'll probably be your last day in the symphony orchestra. But in jazz music, we don't want, in particular when you're improvising, not playing ensemble, that's a different story. But if you're improvising, we don't want the improvisers to play the same thing every day the same way. I'm thinking of a story when Ella Fitzgerald did a thing called the Great American Songbook, music of George Gershwin. And she did Can't Take That Away From Me. You know the song. The way you wear your hat, the way you sip your tea, the memories of all that, right? That's how the song was written. Is that how Ella Fitzgerald? That's the way you sip your tea, the memories of all that. Oh no, you can't take that away from me. Oh, you can't take that away from me, right? She personalized it. And that comes from Africa. African musicians, they personalize. There's a certain personification of the music, which also happens in jazz. So we listen to music at the beginning of every rehearsal. We sight read every day. At my band, we'll read something, we'll pass it out, talk it down, play it top to bottom, put it away, just to get the band's eyes accustomed to reading. And then, as we begin to rehearse the chart, I would talk about ancillary aspects of the music. For example, if we're playing a Count Basie chart, whatever the chart may be, I'll use Milton Swing again. Count Basie, his adopted home was Kansas City, Missouri, 18th Street and Vine, which is where the Musicians Union was. And during the same time was Prohibition. During the same time was the Harlem Renaissance. During the same time was women's suffrage. So what I would always do in rehearsals, I would make sure that there was some type of historical connection to the music. Talking about bootleg liquor, talking about numbers running, talking about the Mayor Pendergast, who was the mayor of Kansas City during this time, who was a gangster, ended up going to jail for tax evasion. So that way we offered some type of context to the chart. Then I would use what we call head charts. Now a head chart, I would use these as a means of gaining dexterity, teaching your time, rhythm, blend, balance. So for example, we would take a tune like Donna Lee, Charlie Parker, and I would have the entire band, including the drummer, including the bass player, including the guitar player, would all play the head in unison. So we would have something like this. Right? So the whole band is playing this in unison. By doing this, we really address rhythmic precision, intonation, because we're playing in unison. You can tell when somebody's not playing in tune. Guitar players traditionally don't read very well. Now they got to read. Bass players normally don't play lines. They play walking bass, and now they got to play a melody. So what it did, it raised the overall level of dexterity, technique throughout the entire band. And then finally, we dealt with harmony. And I think I sent you guys some handouts. Harmony was and this is what I learned so much from David Baker, how we deal with jazz harmony and theory. And we learned different chord progressions. For example, one of the most common progressions would be that one of the blues. Right? And from that, variations, maybe bird blues. So when you understand how harmony works, when it's time to improvise, so you're able to really weave your lines throughout the harmony. Right? We learn 2-5-1 progressions. Minor to dominant to major. Minor to dominant to major. Minor, 2-5-1 progressions. Now, I would recommend this, and I know, speaking from Mr. Python, I remember being in high school, he was doing the marching band, the concert band, supervising the prom, hall duty. I mean, raising money to buy uniforms. I mean, you all know better than I do. It's an all-day encompassing type situation. So when are you going to have time to practice piano? I would say this: find maybe 5 minutes a day to sit down at the piano and play your 2-5-1 progressions, long 12 keys. Because every song uses that progression. La la la, la la, ba la 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 la, right? 2-5-1 progressions. So learn those progressions. Learn the blues. Rhythm changes. I got rhythm changes. So all of those, having that kind of harmonic knowledge will only allow you, when it's time to actually improvise, to have a better understanding of how harmony works. I should stop for just a second to see if there are any questions, because I've been talking now for about 20 to 30 minutes. So,
yes, I have a question,
yes,
Doc. So when people primarily talk about jazz chords, what are they talking about? Are they talking about that 2-5-1 progression? Are they talking about blues chords?
Well, very good question. First of all, we all took music theory, and we learned our right. Now, that same progression, jazz chords tend to have what we call extensions. So if I'm playing a C triad, which is a C major chord, in jazz is going to sound like this. It's going to be a little richer. I'm at the major 7, I'm adding the 9th of the chord, the 5th. That gives it a lot more, dare I say, juice. If I'm playing a minor chord, in jazz it would sound more like this. Or, that's the same chord, that's still F minor, as opposed to this. If I'm playing a minor chord with a major 7, it's going to sound something like this. There's a song that Herb Sugar called Nika's Dream. Right. So you learn a again, I think I sent you guys some piano voicings to learn. When you play those, you get a chance to hear. This is D minor, G7, all diatonic, but then we can alter it. Same function, but now it's a little more color. Going to 2-1, right? So this is what I mean. When I first started doing the jazz band, I would be looking at the score, and I would see C7 sharp 9 sharp 5, and I would just pray, please play the right note, because if you don't, I won't know. You know, how do I fix that? I want you to play it. That's the C7 sharp 9 sharp 5. Resolve to 1, possibly. And we all know those sounds. Like I was singing those sounds long before I knew what it was.
Right.
So it becomes a matter of just familiarizing yourself by sitting at the piano and playing those sounds, and then analyzing what it is you're doing. Did I answer your question?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Any other questions while we?
Yes, we have one more question from Joanne Gates.
Hi, Joanne.
Hi. Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes. How do you teach the concept of free jazz to your students?
Free jazz. That's a great question. Now, free jazz. Let me back up. Jazz itself is about conversation, and probably one of the most difficult things for young jazz players to do is to listen to each other. Like you and I having a conversation right now. If we're talking, and I'm doing all the talking, and you can't get a word in, that's not really a conversation. You speak, and I listen, I nod, yeah, okay, I understand, yeah. And then I speak for a while. Now, free jazz, this came about, we think of Ornette Coleman as being the father of free jazz. And
what's that name again?
Ornette Coleman, Ornette Coleman, Ornette Coleman, just passed me not long ago. But Ornette was sort of the father of free jazz. And what he did was, he would take a motif, and again, in the spirit of improvisation, in the spirit of not knowing, he would have like just a simple motif that he would play, and the other musicians would have to listen and respond to that. They would never know where the song was going to go from one night to the next. You know, the drummer may decide to play a certain rhythmic pattern. The bass player may decide to respond in a certain way. But people think that free jazz is easy to play. It's not. It's probably one of the most difficult genres to play because there are no rules. There are no rules. So that's a very good question. I would sometimes have your band, or maybe have two people start playing, have one person start playing an idea, and have the other person respond to that idea without any rules. Now we know in most cases in dealing with jazz written charts, like the blues, for example, the blues is 12 bars long. We know 1, 2, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's the form, and it's very cyclical. I got rhythm, 32 bar form, AABA form. So you have freedom within that form, but now with free jazz that you just asked about, all of those parameters of 12 bar symmetrical form goes out the window in a lot of cases. A Love Supreme will be by John Coltrane will be a perfect example of free jazz. You have that's the main theme of a love supreme, a love supreme. And within that framework, the musicians, Elvin Jones, John Coltrane himself, are improvising. McCoy Tyner, they're all improvising around that one motivic idea. So I would say, if do you have a band? You have a band?
Yes, sir.
And I would say, maybe take your a trumpet player and maybe a drummer, and have them play off of each other sometime. Experiment with them. But first of all, have them listen to the music of Ornette Coleman. Start with that first of all, so they can have the concept. It's all about concepts. So you can have a concept of what it is they might sound like, not to necessarily imitate Ornette Coleman, but to have an overall concept of what free jazz might sound like. Okay? Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Any other
questions?
Not yet.
If not, take out the Yamaha wind session sheet that I sent you guys. Mm-hmm. Does everyone have a copy of that? It looks like this. I did this. This is a very handsome photograph of me, by the way. You can't tell it because I'm dark anyway, but I'm really dark in this photograph. But anyway, this is I did this probably been 25 plus years, maybe longer than that. I was at Kansas. You can see from my bio here, they're talking about jazz coordinator at the University of Kansas, and that was 3 jobs ago. But anyway, I did this to help directors understand how to interpret notation. There's a thing, now most bands, when I hear them, in fact, this may happen in your situation. If I walk into a high school band, even a college band rehearsal, before it starts, and the drummer's sitting at the drums, he or she's gonna go, you barely hear them go, ding, 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 you barely hear them do that. They're gonna play. Why do they do that? I have a theory. The theory is first of all, it's easier to do that on drums because at some point, all 4 limbs are going to hit at the same time. Pop, right? Mm-hmm. Pop, right? And that's fun to do. So most high school bands don't have a problem playing rock or even what we call even 8th note notation. Mm-hmm. Like if you're playing even 8th notes, right? Easy to do. But swing, ding, 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 ding. It's a lot more difficult. One easy way to kind of gain this concept is think about what we call the boogie woogie piano, and we know this from people like Meat Lux Lewis and Willie the Lion Smith. All play what we call the boogie woogie. If you were to dissect that, you would hear bump 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 bump. Subdivisions of 8th note triplets. We call that a shuffle groove in the jazz world. It's a shuffle. You might remember years ago, a lot of high school and college pep bands at game would play that thing called the Hey Cheer. That comes from Boogie Woogie. Hey! That's the Boogie Woogie groove. There was a song that was done by the Doobie Brothers called Minute by Minute. Minute by minute by minute. That's Boogie Woogie. So if you can understand that subdivision of the 8th note triplet, then when you're playing bop, bop, do that bop, 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 bop. So if you look at my sheet here, what I've done at the bottom there, I have 2 8th notes equal 3 8th note triplets with the first 2 notes tied, gives you up down, up down, bop, bop, boop, bop, 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 do that, bop. Subdivision, right? So if you understand that, then your bands won't rush. What typically happens, young bands don't subdivide. They don't hear the ba-do-da, boop, bop, bop, do that, bop, ding, 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 which is why bass players will reinforce the eighth note triplet. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. They're reinforcing the eighth note triplet. And again, I would have my band listen to. Now most of us have this anyway, because this is church. This is what happens in church. You know,
Right.
This is why I always, when I put my band together, I try to find me a drummer who has played in church. Because A, the camp's gonna be good. They're gonna have a great concept. They may not have much of a strong jazz concept, but the overall feel is good. So I would really get to a point where I understand how we understand this notation. I have another lick here. That's example number 2. Now, no self-respecting card-carrying jazz musician would ever play it that way. There we go. Now, one thing about the same rhythm, if you're playing a swing tempo, like again, modern swing, bop, medium swing, a bop, ding, ba dee, lead up, be lead up, the boot up, right? But if you're playing an up tempo tune, like I did Donald Lee, the concept there is the faster the tempo, the more even the eighth notes become. In fact, if you look at the back, and this is why I get the whole idea of how you would interpret the eighth note line in bebop. The rule is the first note, the highest note, and the last note of a phrase will be accented. First note, highest note, last note. So there's a tune called Groovin' High. If you go, it's gonna sound jagged. Because in this music, all notes are not created equal. It's a very Republican concept. All notes are not created equal. You know, first note, the highest note, the last, they get special attention. Lead up, boot up. The lowest note will be ghost. Because if you keep them all the same, it's gonna sound stilted, and you don't want that. For my line that I have here, and what I hear from most young bands, they don't emphasize the accents in them. Accents give the music character. Accent, as opposed to it's like talking to somebody who's like a, you know, sometimes you like that dead fish handshake. You've been sticking somebody's hand, you put the hand on their cheek, hand like, glad to meet you. Or you telling your girlfriend or your boyfriend, your wife or husband, honey, I love you, I really love you. You may do, but you don't sound very convincing. And the same thing happens when you don't have the accent. When the accents are missing, it lacks personality. It brings personality to the music. Any other questions about this style here before I move on?
Can you talk a little bit about the different articulations, I guess, that are, popular in jazz music?
Yes. And just like in any music, I mean, think about it. We have marcatos, we have tenuto markings, we have staccato. All those things are part of the music as well. But as I mentioned, when you have rhythms, you will interpret them slightly different. I mentioned the eighth note, followed by quarter note, followed by an eighth note. Do, dot, dot. Do, dot, dot. And there's no separation between the eighth note and the quarter note. If you're playing in a concert and you would go dot, 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 jazz world, do, dot, dot, do, dot, dot, do, dot, dot, do, dot, dot. In fact, if you look at my sheet on the second page, Example 3B, I have dot, dot, da, do, dot, 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 da, do, dot. So the quarter notes, beats 1 and 2, have a marcato marking. Beat 3 has a tenuto. And again, when you think about jazz articulation, it has a lot to do with how we talk. There's a tune that was written by Sonny Rollins called Tenor Madness. Note that goes, ba 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 da, beep ba ba da, beep ba ba do ba do do da, beep ba ba da. The real song, the real essence of that song came from him telling somebody, "Go park the car." So go park the car, go park the car, go park the car. That's where it came from.
Yeah.
So
It makes sense.
So how we speak has a lot to do with how we articulate. Get out of here, man. What you talking about? Right? Think about how we talk. What? Do it? Do it? Or do it? I don't believe a word you said. So language has a lot to do with how we articulate. So again, if you and how we as African Americans talk, in fact, if we speak English, it's a much more legato concept of speaking. We don't say, "How are you doing today?" I am doing fine, thank you. We don't talk like, "How are you doing today?" How are you doing today? How are you doing today? I'm doing fine, thank you. I'm doing what's new? So how we speak has a lot to do with how we articulate. And the same thing happens in music. Any other questions? We move on. If you look on my same sheet, and now we're getting down to the nitty gritty, I have, don't ask me why I have 19 instead of 20. I have 19 little do's and don'ts for a jazz ensemble director. Now, I mentioned earlier about how many of us were trained in concert band and marching band, and we tend to rehearse our jazz bands the same way. What you do not want to do if you're playing a tune like Satin Dog, right? You don't want to be standing in front of your band going, da, 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 da. They don't need you to do that. You become a distraction. Your job as director is more needed in rehearsal, in preparation, and to count the tunes off and get the hell out of the way. You come back if you need to cue the band or cue a certain section, then you come back. But standing in front of the band, conducting, that tells me right away this guy or lady is thinking like a concert band director. Jazz bands don't need conductors, they need directors, which is why we call it directing the band. You're like a traffic cop. You're not a conductor, right? Okay. So your job is to cue tricky entrances. Let's say there's been a long solo section, and sometimes somebody may not be counting all the rest. They're not quite sure when to come in. This is what I used to do. I give them a little fist. And I remember being at Kansas. I had to tell my band, this doesn't mean black power. It means get ready to play. So this is the cue. I give them 4, 3, 2, 1. Cue them, bring them back in, and get back out of the way. So your job, and this is primarily on the concert, and even toward the end of just before performance, your role should not be to conduct the band. Number 3, create a performance environment in rehearsal. What do I mean by that? Have patience. If the band's not playing in tune, let them know it. If the band's not playing rhythmically precise, let them know that. You're always performing. You're never rehearsing. You're always performing. The real magic should be in the rehearsals. I had my last gig before the COVID-19 pandemic hit. I was asked to be the guest conductor for the Music for All Bands of America National Jazz Band. And these were some of the top high school kids from all over the country, and we were doing this in Indianapolis. And I was saying, well, are we going to still do this? Because everything around me is starting to fold up. Governors are shutting down states. I'm saying, are you sure we're going to do this? Yep, Dr. McCurdy, we're going to come on, get on an airplane, come on. I get to Indianapolis. I left on that Tuesday. I got there that Wednesday. We rehearsed all day Wednesday, all day Thursday, And then we got the word that the governor had shut down the entire state of Indiana. Everybody's going home. We're done. And we knew before the kids knew, but I had established a performance-like environment doing rehearsals. And some of our most magical moments, and I told the kids, I said, look, you know what? The concert is for your parents and for the sponsors, but the real work and the real fun that we're going to have these couple of days are going to be in rehearsal. So so if you can, make every rehearsal just like a performance. Avoid talking too much. If you hear something that needs to be fixed, stop it, fix it, play it. Spend more time playing than talking. Sometimes my colleague, John Clayton, you know that name, he's a great bass player, played with the bass band years ago, has his own band now. John would sometimes cut the band off and tell the band, that was perfect what you just did. So rather than cut the band off to criticize all the time, cut the band off, what you just did was absolutely perfect. Do that every time. And what that does, it also boosts the morale of the band. Because think about it, it becomes like a Pavlovian effect where you cut the band off, the band's like, okay, I'm gonna be yelled, this is gonna be yelled at again for not doing something. But if you cut the band off and you say, that was fantastic, do that again. Be positive. Treat everyone the same way. We all have issues. You had maybe a little spat with your wife or husband, and when your kids did something stupid, or you got stopped by the cop on your way to school. Leave that outside the rehearsal hall. Don't bring that energy into the rehearsal. No matter what you're dealing with personally, kind of separate that from working with students. Bring a real positive, can-do attitude to rehearsal. Avoid rehearsing the same kind of style back to back. In other words, don't rehearse a swing tune, and then another swing tune, and then another swing tune. Maybe do a swing tune, a Latin tune, a rock tune, a ballad, just to kind of break up the monotony of the rehearsal. Most high school band directors who don't understand how to deal with rhythm section, and I'll talk about that in just a second, tend to ignore the rhythm section. They spend all their time attending to the horns, the winds, the trumpets, the trombones, and the saxophones. So the bass player stands over there the whole time doing nothing. You cut the band off. The drummers, they get no instructions. Why do you do that? Because you don't feel comfortable. I certainly didn't. I didn't know what to tell the drummers. Like, man, don't you're playing too loud. That's all I can tell you. Guitar player, you're playing too loud. But you want to understand how those instruments are supposed to function. Very quickly, the piano player, his or her job is to outline the harmonies of the tune and provide what we call comping. So if I'm playing the blues, right? I'm comping. Wow, this is what happens on the lead. Right? You're comping. That's the piano player's job. Bass player's job. Right? Laying out the foundation, being the BASE and the BASS of the band. The drums, moving from the swing era, which was primarily just to keep the groove, ding, 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 right? But then keep everything where people can dance to it. But now with bebop, that role becomes ding, 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 pow, pow, syncopations, anticipated notes or rhythms. Ding, 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 pow, 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 pow. So you're phrasing just like a horn player would do. Guitar player, in many ways, parallels with what the pianist can do or should do. Okay, let me move on. And there are all kinds of books that are available that you can really learn, how to coach your rhythm section. I use a book called Jazz Pedagogy. It was written by Dick Dunscombe and Dr. Willie Hill. It's a great book because all the chapters were written by people who play those instruments. So they talk about how does the bass player function within the context of a jazz band. Piano player, how does he or she function? How does a guitar player deal with voices and comping patterns? Let's see. When I got to Kansas, as I mentioned, we had a lot of pre-med engineering majors. So it was important for me to maximize the rehearsal, to let the band know every rehearsal what tunes that we were going to be rehearsing. So I would post every week, here's our rehearsal schedule for the week. And I would always tell them, the rehearsal is not a time to learn your rhythms and your notes. Rehearsal is the time to put it all together. And it took me maybe 2 years to instill that mindset with the band. When you come to rehearsal, you're not fumbling trying to find the rhythms and notes. This is the time that we put it all together, so you come to rehearsal prepared. And I would, very humanely let them know you're not prepared. This is not going to work very well. You can't stay in the band if you're not going to be prepared in the rehearsal. Now you can't do that if you don't have a full band. But the band gets to the point where the band's starting to sound good and other people want to be in the band. You say, Johnny, I'm sorry, but it sounds like other things are more important to you at the moment. So I'm going to let you go. I'm going to bring somebody else in. That changes the whole mindset of the band. That way they understand you got to come to rehearsal prepared. Begin in rehearsals on time. Start on time, end on time. High musical standards. Expect the best from everybody. When possible, have weekly schedule sectionals for the band. I mentioned earlier about the person sight reading. You want to do that. Allow opportunities for the soloists to rehearse with the rhythm section. When I was at Kansas, the guy who ran the band, when I first got there as a grad student, his name was Jim Barnes. Some of you may know that name. Jim Barnes is a fantastic composer. He's done a lot of great compositions for wind ensemble. So he was a director in the jazz band when I first got there. And Jim was the kind of guy, like he knew that was not his thing, but nobody else wanted to do it, so he kind of got it by default. But he would make statements like, well, that's close enough for jazz, let's move on. Or he would say, if you get to the improvisational section, he would go, well, let's skip this section and move on to the next ensemble section. Again, I would say, allow time for the soloist to play in real time with the rhythm section in rehearsal. If it's not happening in rehearsal, there's a very good chance that it's not going to happen on the concert. So allow that time. Plus you will allow your lead trumpet player chops to rest for a minute. Let the soloist play with the rhythm section. Let's see here. I'm making sight reading often. You should definitely do that. Go to festivals. Now I believe in non-competitive festivals. Or bring outside professionals to come in and listen to your band, to critique your band. Not for a rating or a score or for a trophy, but just to say, in this particular section, I noticed the band tends to rush from going from beat 4 to beat 1. Or I noticed that the drummer is using his or her bass drum pedal on all 4 counts, all 4 beats doing a swing chart. We don't want to do that. Or I noticed that saxophone section, the vibrato is not quite congruent with that of a jazz vibrato. So having a professional listen to your band with fresh ears, they can give you some wonderful feedback. Encourage your students to write. I was real big on this one, especially at Kansas. I mean, I had my students writing for the band, and I always told them, if you write it, we're going to play it. If you write it, we're going to play it. And I'm very, having taught now for almost 35 years, I've taught long enough to see the fruits of my labor. And I have several students right now who are living here in LA who are film composers. One guy's the head of the whole Disney Channel, all the music for that. Another guy is writing on as a ghostwriter for Star Wars movies. The first chart he brought in, he had the transpositions wrong. Like he didn't realize that he transposed tenor saxophone up a ninth. He missed that day in class. He didn't understand that. He had the saxophone playing 3 legend lines below the staff, like playing low F sharps. That's they can tell, but it's not going to sound good. You get the trumpet screaming the whole time. You're going to kill them. They can't play that way all the time. They put them in the middle, So we were able to have our own house composers within the band, and it just made for just a much more enjoyable environment by having people in the band write for the band in the spirit of Duke Ellington. Duke Ellington and his band, he wrote specifically for his musicians. For example, the lead alto part would say Johnny for Johnny Hodges. Trombone part would say Juan for Juan Teasall. Clarinet part, Jimmy for Jimmy Hamilton. So he would write specifically because he knew what the musicians in the band could do. Rehearsal in a variety of physical setups. We didn't talk about this that much, but sometimes we tend to rehearse in our traditional setup with saxophones in the front, trombone, trumpet standing, the rhythm section off to the left of the director, piano, bass, drums, guitar. And when I rehearse in a circle, but when I rehearse with mixed instrumentation to hear some, when I have the saxophones face the brass section, where they can hear it, because it's about being able to hear each other. Huge charts that the band can play. I think Maynard Ferguson's charts have ruined more young bands. Back when I was in high school and college, Maynard Ferguson's band, when you're playing screaming high charts with a high school band, you're gonna hurt someone. So find charts that's obtainable by your band members. If you don't have a lead temper that can play high F's and G's all day, you don't play those kind of charts. If you don't have a rhythm, if you don't have a sax section where they can double playing clarinet and flute, they don't play those kind of charts. Like find charts that will challenge without hurting the band. And then last but probably the most important thing, particularly if you live somewhere where you have access to professional musicians, take a field trip. Take the band down to hear a professional band playing. I know one of my earliest experiences, I was in the all-county band in Palm Beach County, and there was a guy named Bill Lee, I think his name was. And Bill Lee played clarinet, flute, trumpet, trombone, piano, all at the same high level. I had never heard anybody in my life play jazz, first of all, live that well before. And then all of a sudden, I'm starting to hear him playing. It was so inspiring. So you can't put a price tag on hearing people play music live. All right. Any other questions?
Yes, sir. I had a question, and I guess from a high school band director's perspective, how do you encourage more participation in jazz ensemble amongst our younger students?
Now, what's the question again now?
How do you encourage participation in the jazz ensembles from a high school band perspective?
You got to make it fun.
Mm-hmm.
You got to make it fun. You know what I mean? It's got to be fun. It's got to be something that people look forward to doing. And again, I've seen bands where the kids are just having a great time. You can work hard without realizing how hard you're working. You know, you can really be doing some things. You can play music that they want to play.
Right.
But you can also do things that will make it fun. You got to be doing things. You got to be almost like an entrepreneur, thinking, what can I do that's going to make this band be a fun thing to be a part of? And I think that's one of the things that a lot of directors, they make it very boring. I walk into a rehearsal, I see the kids sitting there looking like they're waiting for a bus to come by and pick them up. Something has gone terribly wrong. You want to see kids sitting up in their chairs, eyes are bright, happy, playing great, having a good time. And excellence breeds excellence. If your band starts to sound good, I can tell you, people will want to be a part of it. But it's just a matter of really thinking, okay, if my own child were in this band, how would I approach this? Even from simple teaching, if my own child were a student of mine, how would I approach this ensemble?
Question, Ron.
Mm-hmm.
Ron, I know we're nearing our time limit, but I would like for you to come back again and start with improvisation,
Mm-hmm.
if you would agree to doing that, because I think it's been so informative. We are getting close to our time, but we need to hear the rest of your presentation. And
yes,
so
yes.
I'm asking you if you would come again. We'll arrange a time for you to come back and finish up this with improv. But before we end anything, I think there's somebody on that you need to that want to say hello to you.
Okay.
Dr.
Is
McCurdy.
that fellow on there?
Mr. Pie Fruit.
I had a
Well, I
hard
tell you
time
guys.
getting there, but I finally got before you left.
I called. I spoke with your wife. I said I'm gonna be on at 2 o'clock. Have Mr. Pie from log in if he possibly can. So, but it's so good to hear your voice. I told him before you arrived. I said I told the participants this afternoon. I said this gentleman epitomizes what a real educator is all about. And I told him, I said, no you, no me. It's as simple as that. And I think I hope and pray that everyone on the call today had a band director as loving and as caring and as knowledgeable as you were, in terms of just being an inspiration, to follow your dream, and not just. I mean, we had a lot of people in our band who weren't necessarily going to pursue music as a career, and we learned a lot of life lessons in band. And I suspect that most of you are directors. As you're teaching music, you're also teaching life skills as well. And Mr. Patrick was certainly someone who did that.
Okay, Stack.
All right. Well, Dr. McCurdy, we really appreciate you, man. This has been a wealth of knowledge. I know to myself and my own program, and to every director that's on the call, we really appreciate you. If everyone will go ahead and unmute your microphones, and let's go ahead and give Dr. McCurdy a nice round of applause. Thank you, sir.
Oh, thank you all. Thanks for having me.
I mean, you hit on so many things that was personally informational to me. I was a tuba player, so I didn't have a strong background in jazz, and starting a jazz program here in Georgia was my first go at it.
Yeah.
And you gave me a whole lot of information that I think I can take and utilize in my program, and I really appreciate that. Especially your handouts. And everyone will be sending out anyone who did not get those handouts, we'll send that information out to you. Just send us your email address and we'll get that to you. Once again, our website is www.ammea.org. And you can contact us there on that website for that information. Once again, Dr. McCurdy, we thank you. This has been a presentation by AMMEA, Advocates for Music and Music Education Association, where our mission is to cultivate, support, and enhance music and music education in the state of South Carolina through fostering academic partnerships, professional learning opportunities, and resources for classrooms. And I think you helped out in a great way today, Dr. McCurdy, in this effort, and we appreciate you, sir. If no one else has any questions or comments.
We're not going to let him off the hook. He's coming back now.
Okay, all right. We got him on tape.
He said yes, right? Okay.
All right. So we got you on tape, admitting to coming back. So.
Oh, absolutely.
Very soon, dude.
Anytime you call, at this point, all my gigs have been canceled, so I'm home. I am quarantining like you will not believe. So I'm home. So anytime you want to have me come back, I will be more than happy to come back. So just ask.
We thank you guys for coming through. We're gonna go ahead and end this session. Dr. McCurdy will be in contact.
All right.
Everyone, be on the lookout for that email with the information.